HSBC's chief economist is Stephen King, and he says that oil could be the next Greece, or the new Greece. Why?
Very simply, because last year, at the beginning of last year, people were very optimistic about the global recovery. Oil prices went up, and the rise in oil prices led to basically a significant slowdown in economic activity. And the same thing has happened this year. We had oil prices down at about $90 a barrel back in October, November of last year. They've gone up quite significantly to 125. If they carry on rising, it really chokes off consumer spending.
I read your report on this. It's very difficult, isn't it, to quantify the exact correlation between the price of oil and the detrimental effect it has as it rises on economies.
Very tricky. There are various threshold effects. We're not quite sure exactly where they are. We're not talking about recession coming through. We're simply saying that the growth rate that is coming through currently, which is quite strong, may fade during the course of this year.
What do you believe? I mean, we saw 125 a barrel. What do you believe is the pain threshold point?
For what is the key question here? Because
To damage growth.
Well, I think it already is damaging growth. We saw this
seriously
last year.
damage growth.
If you're going to have a recession, maybe 150 or 160. Right. But if you're at 125 or 130 thereabouts, it's enough to push headline inflation up. It's enough to squeeze people's real incomes, their real wages. It's enough, therefore, to cause consumption to slow during the course of this year. So, there's a lot of hope currently about a strong recovery, particularly in the US. Lots of expectations that perhaps the worst is over, that policy is finally working. But with rising oil prices, may be the case that perhaps things aren't going to be quite so good later this year.
As we look at Europe, and we'll talk to you about the US in just a second, as we look at Europe, it's perhaps a little simplistic to say it's now a two-speed Europe, but it's a two-speed Europe.
It's very accurate. I mean, the reality is that...
But does it matter that it's a two-speed Europe? Often in the United States, you'll have a two-speed US. You'll often have states growing another sort.
I think it matters politically, because if you've got Germany doing extremely well continuously over a number of years, but at the same time Spain, Italy, Portugal suffering with persistent recession and persistent austerity, how you make the numbers add up is very difficult. In the US case, there's a federal fiscal authority that can redistribute income. In Europe, there isn't one currently, so therefore the politics that comes through, the strains and stresses of winners and losers within Europe is not a good thing.
As we look at QE3 or whatever QE in the United States is almost a non-starter now, isn't it? Looking at the growth numbers we're seeing.
Well, that was true of a year ago with QE2. People said that QE2 couldn't possibly happen. By August, it did happen.
We are seeing, unemployment coming down. We're seeing retail sales going up. We are seeing an improvement.
And you had exactly the same last year. I'm serious about this, absolutely. If you go back
to the beginning
of... I'm not going to get... No. At the beginning of last year, you had a very optimistic view about the US. The consensus expectations for growth had really rebounded from the late months of 2010. Everyone was very optimistic, and QE2 was definitely ruled out. And as 2011 progressed, it suddenly turned out we'd shifted from concerns about inflation or concerns about too strong a recovery to no recovery. And that's what we've got the risk for this year as well.
Which brings us full circle back to oil. Good to see you, Steve. Many thanks for coming in and talking.